Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The weather outside is frightful. Nah, not really. The sports world is so delightful, and actually not too bad right about now. And since we've got no place to go, wait, what? Let's go. As in, let's get this podcast party started on all that's happening, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that we can close the book on Home Run Derby and an All-Star game, which I'm sure a lot of people, maybe the young folk, will look at and say 20 years from now, remember that 2025 All-Star game where Kyle Schwarber in a swing-off beat Junior Caminero for the National League to win that All-Star game of that year? And for yours truly, God willing I'm still around, then I'm going to be just, what? Huh? With question marks popping up all over my head because I'm sorry, that was an all-star game to forget. And did I watch? I did not. Of course I saw highlights. Of course I know what happened. Of course I have to have my fingers on the pulse when it comes to the game itself, despite the fact that I wouldn't watch if it was in my own backyard. And for all the reasons that I've explained here, whether it was on the live stream yesterday, every Wednesday, 12 noon on YouTube, whether it was on Monday's podcast, whether it was even last Thursday's podcast, chronicling the All-Star games of yesteryear, which pale in comparison to the games of today. And I understand I sound like an old man, get off my lawn, but it's the truth. It's a fact. So if you're anywhere between 12 and 25 and you said, JAYREELZ, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know what you missed, you don't know, I don't want to hear it. But between the game itself, which actually turned out to be pretty decent, considering that the National League got off to a big lead, 6-0, which is rare, because the NL has been getting pounded here over the last couple of decades in these All-Star games. And here it was, 6-0. Pete Alonso with a 3-run homer in between. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, wow, the National League's actually going to have a laugher for once in a blue that the National League would finally have a win under their belt. And here it was. The American League came storming back to the point where they tied the game and then it went into extras. Oh, no, wait, it did not, because that's when you had the swing off, which I didn't know about. And I know yesterday on the live stream, the baseball purist, thanks to him, he said, you're a hardcore sports fan. Don't you know that there's a swing off? I had no clue because I'm not following it. I'm not on top of the All-Star game rules. I'm not on top of the All-Star game period. And even with the Home Run Derby the night before where Cal Raleigh won, and I knew you had a scenario where Jazz Chisholm could hit the ball out of the infield where he had 4 home runs. And we know he could hit home runs, but he's not a quintessential slugger, power hitter, a guy that will, in his sleep, hit 35 home runs. And yes, he's going to run into quite a few pitches throughout the course of a year. But yes, in that particular spot, in that instance, obviously you saw him go up in flames. And not to pick on Chisholm by any means, but that is not a good look when you have a home run derby to the likes of, in yesteryear, whether it be Aaron Judge, Ken Griffey Jr., Juan Gonzalez, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire. It's almost like it's the slam dunk competition light. And listen, the slam dunk competition, as you know, in the NBA has been a disaster because you do not have any big-time stars participating there. So at least baseball has that over the NBA. And here I am talking about slam dunk competitions and home run derbies to start off a podcast. It just goes to show you where we're at here. But I will pivot in about 90 seconds. Now that the All-Star game is complete, now that we could put this in our rearview mirror, take a look at what's going to lie ahead as I have my pseudo crystal ball in front of me to see what's going to happen here. Because now, with the season picking up tomorrow, and it's going to be a 2.5-month sprint to get to the end of September and into October for maybe not a lot of teams. If you listen to the podcast on Monday, I gave you a quote-unquote first half review about what these races could look like, and I gave you a little teaser heading into today. And as we look at it right now on a big picture, unfortunately, baseball looks like they're going to have 3 teams that may battle it out for a couple of spots. And what I mean by that is, when we look at the National League, we know it's going to be, at least for right now. I understand anything can happen. We got to wait for the season to play out, etc. But we would think that when we get to October 1st, it's going to be Phillies, Mets, Cubs, Brewers, Dodgers. Those teams you would think right now are going to be in the bank. And then the other three teams will be San Francisco, San Diego, and maybe St. Louis. I don't know about Arizona. I don't know about the Reds and teams like that where they're on the fringe where, yes, they could go on a run. Maybe they get a surprise trade at the deadline. And next thing you know, they're off and running, a la the Detroit Tigers of last year. Not that they made any big moves during the deadline, but we know the run that they had. And obviously that's carried into this year for the team that plays in the Motor City. But the National League, like I mentioned, you have those five. And in the American League, you're looking at Toronto right now. And I understand Toronto, they can be hot and cold, but they played very well here over the last month. Them, the Yankees, you would think when it's all said and done, and they're going to try to bring in Eugenio Suarez, which right now is the worst kept secret in baseball. And maybe on top of that, they could get Zach Gallen. So some reinforcements for that rotation. Now they're going to have to give up a pretty penny. Maybe some young pitching, another young prospect. That we'll have to wait and see. The trade deadline is actually 2 weeks from today, 6 p.m. So you know I'm going to be all over that as we get closer to the deadline. But it's Toronto, Yankees, Detroit, Houston, and then pick the other teams, whether it be Tampa, Boston, Seattle. I don't know if you're going to look at any of the teams in the AL Central. Right now, I would not even look at Kansas City, Minnesota, or Cleveland for that matter. Texas could be a team that could lay in the weeds, and who knows what they're going to do before the deadline. And other than that, that's it. So your 9 teams, both New York teams, Dodgers, Phillies, Cubs, Brewers, Toronto, Detroit, Houston. And then the other 3, you might as well just throw them in a hat and pick them out, and there are your final 3 teams for the postseason in the National American League. And I kind of hate to put it that way, but really, what is it that I could say as of right this moment that I'm going to feel uber confident that the Twins, Royals, Guardians, Angels, and all right, you want to say Texas only because they went to a World Series 2 years ago and they have a manager that knows his way around a pennant race and obviously postseason baseball, and one Bruce Bochy? Absolutely. And right now they're currently 4 in the loss, but 3.5 back of Seattle. Obviously they're division rivals, and I'm sure they have at least 6 games to go from now to the end of the season. So anything can happen. I get that. But baseball, despite it being unpredictable, i.e. the Tigers of last year, and even the Mets to a lesser degree with their record June 2nd as of last year and then being the best in baseball from that point on, I would think that this is going to be what it is. Because I don't see any of those teams in the American League all of a sudden making a run or hanging around there, let's say in the latter part of August into September. And the National League, although a little bit more competitive because you have teams that have been there, done that, whether it is the Giants. Now, I understand the Giants haven't made the postseason in 4 years, and the team is a lot different now than it was then. But they are a big name. They are a team that obviously has won some championships in the previous decade. And not to say you could just all of a sudden think that because they have that little bit of a pedigree as a franchise that all of a sudden that's going to translate into this decade or even this year for that matter. Because in 2021, when they won 107 games, what happened to them? They lost in the division series to the Dodgers, which was unfair, as we know. But the Giants are the Giants. It's not as if it's a team like Colorado or even the Nationals who won a World Series in 2019 that are in the playoff mix where you could say, oh, well, maybe they have a shot. Giants, you know, they are reputable. Giants obviously have stars, and they've done whatever it could take for them to get to a point where they're going to contend there in the National League wildcard. Padres, we know they've been in the playoffs over the last few years, so they're going to be stout. The Cardinals, I get it. The reputation just based on their organization, although they have not done much here over the last few years, but who knows what John Mozeliak, the GM, if he's going to be able to buy or sell at the deadline, that remains to be seen. And then you have the Reds, where their ownership is cheap and a bunch of curmudgeons, but you do have Terry Francona there. You do have a young and very good pitching staff on top of an electric player and Ellie De La Cruz. And who knows if he's going to be able to carry them to the finish line as a 5th or 6th seed in the National League to where they could surprise people. And Arizona, I get it. World Series 2 years ago, they're currently what? 6 in a loss, 5.5 back. Anything can happen, but now you got the rumors with Suarez and even Gallen. Remember, Merrill Kelly's also a free agent too at the end of this year. So maybe they're thinking of bringing some reinforcements back. Because remember, Jordan Montgomery earlier this year had to go through Tommy John surgery. He's probably not going to be back at least to the middle of the season next year. And then you also have Corbin Burns, the big free agent signing, who in the middle of the year had to leave for Tommy John surgery. So you're not going to see him toward the end of next year. So maybe they're going to look to try to trade off these pieces to bring back some either young talent that's ready-made for the major leagues or prospects, because they know that this team moving forward could be in a quagmire. So you have that scenario, and that's why when you look at the baseball landscape, it is, I won't go as far as saying dire, but it doesn't look good, especially between now and the end of the year, which I believe the final day of the regular season is what? I think it's September 29th. Wait, let me think. The NFL season starts the 4th. That's the 7th. That's Sunday. So the 28th. That is the last day of the baseball season. So I would think, unless there's going to be a surprise team in either one of these leagues that's going to all of a sudden go on a tear. I don't expect the Orioles to do so. Again, any of those AL Central teams, the Angels, maybe they're going to rally around the absence of their manager, Ron Washington, to maybe do it for him. Who knows? But again, the Angels right now are 2 under 500, which for them at this stage, this point of the year, is actually pretty good. But do we expect them to be in the mix? Do we expect them to hover around and try to be finicky and be a team that's going to, when it's all said and done, get into the postseason? Not me. I don't think that in the least. So as far as baseball and where I'm going to see these teams and how it's going to unfold, I'd be very surprised if what we see right now, if that's going to change between now and, let's say, the next to last week of the year. Because I can see American League, it's going to be Yankees of Toronto to get that top spot in the American League. And I get the Red Sox, they're on a 10-game winning streak. And they have played lights out. Granted, they've beaten up the Colorados of the world and teams like that along the way. And I understand they did sweep the Rays heading into this All-Star break, but you would expect them to cool off at some point, and maybe the Mariners will get some reinforcements as well. Who knows? Tampa, they don't look to be leaving anytime soon. Texas is the one team that, out of that bunch that I've mentioned, they're the one team that I could see them hanging around, but they haven't really gotten on track all year. So when it comes to those 5 teams for those 3 spots, and in the National League, it's the same thing. Really, it's 6 teams if you're going to throw the Reds in there, because they are 2.5 back, 3 in a loss, and they are 3 games over 500. So unless I see something change, that's what's going to be, I think, from here on out. I wish there was a scenario where you had 6 teams jockeying for 1 or 2 spots in the wild card, or more closer division races, because as I mentioned the other day, the AL Central, the AL West, and the NL West, to me, are formalities. And I understand anything can happen, injuries, whatever, but these teams have played well. And I'm going to go through some of that in a minute as far as with the favorites in these divisions and how these teams could shape up as we get to the end of the year. But the wild card, it's pretty much going to be, I think, what it is and what you see here. I wish it could be more. I wish I could say, oh, no, I can see the Twins going on a run. Oh, wait, I can see Arizona getting into the mix. And a lot of this is predicated on what happens there between now and the deadline. Because if Arizona's going to sell, then chances are they're probably not going to even sniff a wild card spot. Or same for the Twins, for that matter, as they may look to unload a couple of players on their team. And a bunch of other squads that are looking right now as if maybe even the Braves, for that matter. And I don't expect the Braves. They're the one team that has certainly fallen from grace. And it's a situation where if the Braves do go on a run, they still have so much ground to make up. They're currently 11 games under 500. And right now, what are they? 10 back, 9 back of the final spot in the wild card. I mean, that is a lot to ask for, even with them and their body of work and their pedigree, for them to come all the way back. Now, could it happen? Obviously, anything could happen in baseball. We've seen the Rockies go on that crazy run where they won 20 of 21 when they went to a World Series back in 2007. Or you want to talk about the Tigers of recent vintage? We could go through all this. But baseball right now, not to say that it's going to be all crickets and butterflies, where it's going to be relatively quiet, but I don't see this being a juicy pennant race. I don't see this being one that's going to be white knuckler, scoreboard watching. Yeah, scoreboard watching the teams that are involved, whether it's a team that's trying to win a division or a team that's trying to get into the postseason where they're just a game or two out. But as far as having a plethora of teams just all of a sudden now fighting for one or two spots, I don't think that's going to happen. And with these divisions, like I said, whether it be Houston in the AL West, who currently have a 5-game lead, it was 7, and remember, I don't want to say they've done it with smoke and mirrors, but they've done it with no Yordan Alvarez. Obviously, Alex Bregman and Kyle Tucker have departed this past offseason, and Jeremy Pena's been in and out of the lineup. And somehow, some way, under their second-year manager, Joe Espada, here they are. They're almost like the boogeyman, where you think you're going to be able to chop their heads off, and they're done. Absolutely not. And remember, last year they started off 12-24, and they still won a division. Mind you, they got swept by the Tigers on the way to an early vacation in Cancun, but still, just an admirable job. And this year the same, where Seattle got out of the gates fast and furious, and then all of a sudden they came back to the pack, and guess who shot right past them as if they were standing still? That's right, the Astros. Now, with them, the Tigers with an 11-game lead, forget about it. I still think that the American League, the best team there are the Tigers. I'm still not sold on the Astros because in order for me to really look at them as a team to be reckoned with, despite all they've done here over the last decade, these last 2 years, they haven't been able to win a home game in the playoffs. They haven't. Look at the last 2 years. They lost the 2 games to the Tigers in the wild card. They got swept at home 4 games by the Texas Rangers. Drew a blank there for a second. In the ALCS, and they, for whatever reason, can't seem to find their way to a victory in their own building. And until they get to October, despite the fact that they won a World Series 3 years ago and all of the success that they've had, here in the last couple of years, that has not been the case. So to me, I think this is the Tigers' league to come out of. I know the Yankees could be dangerous, and let's see what they're going to do between now and July 31st. And I'm curious to see what Toronto's going to do, considering that they have a 2-game lead, and they're going to play the Yankees early next week in Toronto. 3 games, so it's going to be interesting to see if the Yankees inch closer, or if there is a little bit of separation between now and then. Let's say the Yankees are 3 back, and the Blue Jays host them to see what they could do against the Yankees. And I know the Yankees are going to want to exact some revenge after getting swept there last month, or really at the early part of this month, because it was right before the 4th of July weekend. So you got that there in the American League, which I'm fascinated to see how that's going to unfold. And like I said, other than the AL East in the American League, you got nothing as far as the divisions go. And in the National League, you know it's going to be Phillies, Mets down the stretch. How that's going to be handled, I think it's hot potato. Whoever has the potato last and is just able to hang on to it, they're going to win the division. I hope the Mets do, because the Mets, if they do win a division, now it doesn't automatically mean that they're going to get a bye, because right now the Cubs and the Dodgers have better records than any of the teams in the NL East. So that means there'll be a 3 seed in the National League playoff picture. So something to keep in mind as we get to the second half, because just because, let's say if the Mets win a division, all right, do we get a bye? Not the case. As it is, they'd be the 4th seed in the, no, as a matter of fact, they would not. Because I believe the Brewers, now they have a game at hand. Let me see the wild card standings real quick. Just like I thought, the Brewers do have a better record, so the Mets actually would be the 5th seed, and they would play at Milwaukee. Haven't we seen that movie before? And again, that's if the season ended today. But whomever's in the National League East right now will still be looking up to the other 2 teams, so they wouldn't have an automatic bye, where the Cubs and the Dodgers right now, with the Dodgers holding a half-game lead over the Cubs, considering, 58-39, 57-39, that's where they stand. And I understand, slimmest of margins, it's not as if the Phillies or the Mets can't go past either the Cubs or Dodgers for that matter. But I would think between that race and even Cubs-Brewers, which they're separated by 1 game, that's probably going to take us through the summer, at least so we think. when it comes to divisions, the West, I'm not buying. I think the Dodgers are going to win that division despite all their injuries with their rotation and guys coming in and out of the lineup. I think they'll be fine when it's all said and done. But unfortunately, that's what I have. I wish I could tell you more. I wish I could say, oh, this is what we have in baseball. We have a lot cooking. So many races, so many divisions that are wide open. All right, 50%, I guess you take. But you'd like to have more. Because we already know that the teams that rise to the top are the teams that, of course, not only play well, as we know, but teams that certainly either have a pedigree, teams that either have a payroll, or teams that certainly know their way around races when it comes down a stretch of a season in order for them to get to a postseason. The Brewers, for instance, they know by winning a division last year, so therefore they're in a tight race. It's not as if they're going to shudder or blink at the opportunity of not trying to win a division or try to outlast their foes just, 90 minutes down the turnpike there from Milwaukee to Chicago. And same for Mets Phillies. You think the Mets are going to be afraid of what the Phillies do and vice versa? Absolutely not. And the same for the AL East, even though Toronto's in first, but you think the Yankees or Red Sox are going to look at the Blue Jays as, oh, geez, they're just too tough. We're not going to be able to beat them. No, absolutely not. So at least we have the division races in that regard, and then whatever's going to happen there with the wild card, all right. Like I said, time will tell, and we'll see. But right now, it is not promising in my eyes to think that we're going to have a summer to remember or pennant races that will go down in the history books when it's all said and done, a la the Rockies of 07 or even other teams that have been able to come back from the dead and make it into a postseason and win the whole thing. And another example are the 19-31 Washington Nationals of 2019. And what happened to them? Not only did they win the World Series, but they won the World Series by what happening? Winning the first 2 games in Houston and the last 2 games in Houston, which therefore hasn't happened in World Series play. So that's baseball. Very unpredictable. Wait and see, but I'm looking forward to it. And let me get to the schedule here to open up. And you got some interesting series right out of the gate. You have the Red Sox going to Chicago to play the Cubs. So you have those 2 great franchises in that venerable building, one of the oldest in the sport with them in Fenway. But of course, the series being at Wrigley. So that's one that we'll keep an eye on with those 2 teams. Then you have the Angels playing in Philadelphia, which is always a big thing because Mike Trout goes home. And then the Angels will play the Mets in the early part of the week up at Citi Field. So a little northeast trip for the Angels as they come to town, or at least are in the area as of early next week. And then, of course, Philadelphia, homecoming for him. You have the Giants playing in Toronto. Good series there. Mets will play the Reds. As we know, the Reds just 3 back and 2.5 in the wild card. You have the Yankees playing in Atlanta, for what that's worth. Baltimore at Tampa. Detroit at Texas. Good series there. St. Louis at Arizona. See if Arizona could creep closer in the wild card. Houston at Seattle. So let's see if the Mariners could get back on track. And they're going to need to sweep. If they take 2 out of 3 and gain a game, all right, you'll live with it. But in order for them to really make it stick with their 5 back, when they're currently 5 back, sweep, and then they'll be 2 back by the end of the weekend. And then you have the Brewers in LA to play the Dodgers. So you have some excellent series to come out of the All-Star break where at least you could say, all right, let's see what's going to happen here, especially with Houston, Seattle, Milwaukee, LA, good measuring stick. And they just played not too long ago where Milwaukee actually swept the Dodgers in Milwaukee. Then you have, as I mentioned, Boston and Chicago, the Cubs that is, among San Francisco, Toronto. A lot of good series. So we will see how that all plays out. And what's the Sunday night game? Detroit at Texas. I thought maybe it would be Cubs and Red Sox, but no, you're going to have Tigers in Texas to play the Rangers. And then one other newsworthy note, you have the current owner of the Tampa Bay Rays, Stu Sternberg, who now is officially, I guess maybe not official is the right word, but he's going to sell his franchise, the Rays, to a group led by Patrick Zalewski, who is a Jacksonville-based housing developer, for $1.7 billion. And Sternberg bought the team, I believe, dating back to, I want to say the early 2000s, maybe 04, for $200 million. and now he's going to sell it for 1.7, which is smart on his part. And a lot of reports that Zalewski and company will probably keep the team in the Tampa-St. Pete area. Again, because he's based out of Jacksonville, a lot of people thinking, oh no, are they going to move them to Duval County? I hope that's not the case. And if they do happen to build a new stadium for the team, which they're going to have to do, hopefully it's on the Tampa side. They are the Tampa Bay Rays. And I understand St. Pete, Tampa, St. Pete, they go hand in hand. But we all know that baseball in Tampa will probably maybe not do better, but I would think they would attract more fans, considering it's a lot more dense in that area. And I've been in that Tampa area because I know they have right by the airport, they have Raymond James Stadium, which is the home of the Buccaneers, and right across the street is the Yankee Complex for spring training. I don't know if they could build a stadium there or maybe a little bit south of that. Who knows? I certainly don't know what development there that they could use to build a new stadium. But I would think the smartest thing would be is to just keep them in that Tampa area, not go to the southern tip of St. Petersburg, which obviously is a long hike from the city limits of Tampa just to get to the ballpark there at Tropicana Field when it gets restored. And they have a couple more years left on their lease. So we'll see. But Stu Sternberg going to sell, not official yet, but chances are it's probably going to be the case. And you're going to have new owners in baseball, and hopefully they do the right thing by keeping the team there and not relocating elsewhere. So that's what we have with the baseball. And now as I pivot to turn my attention, I could go in 100 different directions here. Yes, I could talk about the Open Championship, which is already underway. And you know what? I'll hold off on that. There are a couple of things I want to get. This is pretty much news and notes, people, before I get to the bulk of some things I want to talk about. With training camps opening as early as Tuesday, some on Monday, and we know that the Chargers open up camp and the Lions open up camp, I believe, Saturday because of the Hall of Fame game, which is 2 weeks from today. Oh, my God. And think about that. If the Hall of Fame game is 2 weeks from today, the NFL season officially begins 7 weeks from today. I can't even wrap my head around that. I feel like summer just started 5 minutes ago. And granted, here it is, July 17th? And summer officially started June 20th. So by the time we get to Sunday, we'll already be a month into summer. And people can say, well, JAYREELZ, those are the breaks. What are you going to do? You can't stop time. You can't put a pause on it. I understand, but it's going by way too fast. And I'm not ready for football, as I've said a million times over. But with all that being said, with training camps in earnest beginning early next week, the Jets signed two of their big guns in Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver, and the cornerback Sauce Gardner. And there have been a lot of rumors about either one of those two maybe even being traded as early as the free agent periods beginning back in March. But both of them are staying put. Garrett Wilson, 4 for 130, 90 million guaranteed. Sauce Gardner, 4 for 120. I think he got an upwards of 80-something million guaranteed. And right now, based on their annual, they are the highest paid wide receiver and corner in the sport. And when you're not paying the quarterback a fortune, remember, they gave Justin Fields, I think 2 for 40, with maybe some guaranteed money. Maybe it was a little bit more than that. But they paid their big guns, and hopefully they pay big dividends this year as the Jets look to have a bit of a, I'm not going to go as far as say resurgence, but with a new coach, Aaron Glenn, and yes, with a quarterback that has talent, but is pretty much still a question mark, this team, you would think they're going to do better than the 5-12 last year, and I'm sure they're probably, if they had a window, they're probably looking at 7 to 10. 10 being very high and very optimistic, and 7 you would think you would have to accept or take. Anything north of that, even if it is 8-9 or 9-8, you would take with a heartbeat. So let's see how they do, as they are the richest guys on the block, especially here in the New York area. The Kansas City Chiefs also signed Trey Smith, who's now the highest paid guard in the league in its history, 4 for $94 million. Von Miller signs a 1-year deal with the Commanders as he was a free agent. Let's see if he can stay healthy and help that young team out. And then this one had me puzzled. So the Niners wide receiving core, which obviously has been depleted. Deebo Samuel traded to Washington. Brandon Ayuk on the mend from an ACL. And when you look at their team, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, among others. But who's your other wide receiver on the team? Can you guess? Can you think? Well, you have a kid named Juwan Jennings, who we know has talent, has one more year left on his contract. He's going to make $7.5 million, so it's not as if he's going to the poorhouse. But now he either wants a new deal or to be traded. And last I checked, Juwan Jennings, and listen, kudos to him. It's his life, whatever, and he feels like all these other players are getting deals. The Garrett Wilsons, obviously he's not in that stratosphere. But for Jennings to come out to say that I want a new contract to be traded, I can't recall one thing that Juwan Jennings has done that has made me think, wow, this guy is a top flight wide receiver. And that's not to knock him or his ability or what have you, but I get it. You have demands and you have needs, but for a guy who, if everybody was healthy, would be probably number 3 on the depth chart, do you, my guy. But at the same time, I think it's a little bit presumptuous for him to come out to think that, oh, well, I want to trade if I'm not going to get an extension. Nobody's going to confuse him with Jerry Rice or John Taylor or even T.O. for that matter. Players that have worn that uniform in its illustrious history, and to think he's going to get anything close to what Garrett Wilson or any of these other receivers have gotten, I think not. So I'll just leave that right there. But that's what I have with the NFL. So a lot of signings, as you know, and let's see as training camps open next week how that's going to play out. As yes, we got to get set for an NFL season, which yours truly could certainly wait for it to arrive. All right, now let me get to, again, this is news and notes just to kind of trim the fat here as I lace up the high tops now as I take off the helmet and shoulder pads. One thing in the NBA, Bradley Beal. He formerly the Phoenix Suns and prior to that the Washington Wizards. And for Beal, we know, what was he, 3rd pick overall, coming out of Florida, sharpshooter, 3-time All-Star, was 3rd All-Team NBA, I believe in the 2020-2021 season. Well, he gets bought out by the Suns as they revamp with a new coach and obviously just a whole new roster other than Devin Booker, as we know, got his extension. And I think they're doing the right thing. Now, Booker's going to have to go through some lean years here, but when you get rid of Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and you have to blow it up with Frank Vogel and Mike Budenholzer in back-to-back years, which were unsuccessful, where Vogel got swept in the first round by Minnesota and Budenholzer didn't even make the playoffs. So now you cut out Bradley Beal and now you could really start over. Beal is a very talented shooter when not only just healthy, but when his head is on straight. Because a lot of people question what is not only between his ears, but also what's in his chest, on top of what is he made out of? Is he made out of plastic? Is he made out of glass? Because Lord knows he's been injured a ton, especially over the last X amount of years. Well, he gets bought out and signs reportedly with the LA Clippers, 2 years, $11 million, where I believe he has a player option. And I think that's a good signing, but it's only good if 3 things. A, his head is on straight, and that's the most important thing. Well, maybe second most, because A, he has to be healthy and remain as close to injury-free as possible. And number 2, it's even a bigger thing that his head is on straight. And of course, him being available, which ties into 1 and 2, because if his head isn't on straight and his health is being compromised, you got to wonder where he's at even when he's on the court. Because yes, he could have those shooting nights where he's lights out, or he could have those nights where he'll miss his first couple and then you don't even know he's in the game, but he's on the floor. And that's not knocking Beal, but that's just a fact. So hopefully, him getting out of Phoenix and not meshing well with what happened there over the last 2 years, and now he's going to a veteran team led by Kawhi and James Harden. So he's not going to try to fool those guys. And we know Kawhi, the poster boy for load management, and with James Harden being the poster boy for shrinking in big spots. And then you have a guy who is a combination of both, load management, can't stay healthy, and shrinks in big spots as well. I don't know. It looks like a recipe for disaster, although on paper it does look good as a guy that could be a sharpshooter and provide some offense for a team that's going to need it going into the season, as some expectations will build for a Clipper team to make some noise in the Western Conference. So how I look at it is, yes, on paper, great, but we all know the games aren't played on paper. I guess that's the best way to sum it up as nice as I possibly can, considering I've destroyed Beal but I've only destroyed him based on his performance or lack thereof, availability, etc. Am I wrong? All right, now I'm going to pivot, take off the high tops and lace up the skates. NHL, I told you this is going to be quick, people. Now, the schedule came out yesterday. Now, I'm not going to break down every big game, every little nook and cranny. I know that the Islanders, my team, that will host the Capitals, I believe, in the very first game that Saturday, which will be interesting because the Capitals, as you know, last year with Alex Ovechkin, him breaking the all-time goal-scoring record held by Wayne Gretzky, and he did it on that ice, etc., so on and so forth. But not to talk about the Islanders, it's not about them right this very moment, but the one thing that I really wanted to pay attention to when it came to the schedule, and everybody knows that I have, when I look at the landscape, everybody knows that when we take a look at the marquee games, just like the NBA, when we look at opening night, which the schedule hasn't been released yet, or we look at Christmas Day, or we look at some of those marquee matchups that we'll see throughout the course of the year, the one thing that I wanted to see with the NHL is where the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers are going to match up against one another and whether or not they're going to be on national TV. Because as you know, in the NBA, the finals participants usually have the one game on TNT, obviously not next year because TNT is not in the mix when it comes to broadcasting games. So I guess you're going to look at NBC or even Amazon to stream that game. And I'm sure they're going to try to wrestle that game away from NBC, although that should be on over-the-air TV. And then the other game will be on ABC, ESPN. Fine, no problem. But the issue with the NHL, dating back to last year, is that when Edmonton played Florida, one of those games weren't even broadcast on national TV, whether it be TNT or ESPN, and the other game was on the NHL Network. These are the Stanley Cup Final participants. I don't care if it's Ottawa and Anaheim back in 2007. You got to show these games because at least the good fan and the diehard hockey fan, they'd be interested to see which team or when they're going to match up against one another, don't you think? So I don't want to hear Gary Bettman, oh, our league's doing great and digitally and streaming. No nonsense. And yes, that may be right, or that may be true to a certain extent, but knowing that these teams have faced off in a Stanley Cup now 2 years in a row, you would think that they would put these games on prime time. Now, I understand, just based on what I've researched, they don't know what network or what game or what, I know the dates and times, etc. I got that, and I'll say that in a second. But we don't know if it's going to be aired on ESPN or TNT at this very moment. And I guess when you get closer to the start of the year, they'll have that. But here are the matchups and when they're going to take place for the Oilers and Panthers. The first one is actually pretty soon, and it's at the end of a long trip, which, who knows, that could maybe not bode well for Edmonton, but, and this is perfect, and I get it that TNT, they usually play their games midweek as well as ESPN, and I should know, I think ESPN usually play their games on Wednesday, they highlight, and TNT is more of Tuesday night, and who knows, maybe they'll take Thursday nights now with the NBA not in the fold. But that game, November 22nd, Saturday night, and it's in Florida. So it's not like the game's in Edmonton where people will be like, it's in Edmonton, who cares? It's in Florida, where we've seen the Panthers beat the Oilers in that building back-to-back years. That game automatically should be televised either on ABC, ESPN, Saturday night, why not? And I understand college football, whatever, maybe the ABC has the Saturday night game, who knows, whatever. All right, fine, put it on TNT. That game, Saturday night, all right, it's going to go up against college football. It's not going to go up against the NHL, or the NFL, excuse me. Baseball is going to be long gone, so there's not going to be a World Series game or anything like that. So put that game on cable. Why not? Because if ABC is going to have that college football game that night, and as it is, that is going to be the precursor to the Thanksgiving weekend, where obviously they're going to have all the games and all the big matchups, Notre Dame, USC's, and etc. But so we would think. Who knows? I think USC is going to go to Notre Dame this year. But with that being said, that game should be on TV because the next time they play after that is not going to be till March 19th, which is on a Thursday. So maybe TNT will take that game, and maybe ABC, ESPN will take the first game on November 22nd. And even if it gets buried by college football, so what? As long as you have it as a standalone, whether it's on free TV, ABC, or on ESPN. And don't put it on ESPN Plus, because obviously you have to be a subscriber to that. Put it on your channel. NHL, hear me out. Because if you don't, it's going to get lost in the shuffle. I want to hear, college football, nonsense. Put that game on TV. Simple, case closed. And then an interesting thing about, speaking of Edmonton real quick. Now, I believe they have their first 2 games at home, and then they go on a long road trip to start their year, October 14th. And very surprised to see that Edmonton is starting their 2025-26 road calendar. Madison Square Garden, UBS Arena, and Prudential Center, October 14th, 16th, and 18th, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday afternoon, where they're going to come east to start off the year. So for those here in the tri-state area that want to see Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and maybe McDavid for the final time in an Edmonton Oilers uniform, you've been warned, or at least you've been told. So middle October, Edmonton comes east, and they get it out of the way right out of the bat. So if you're curious to want to see him play live in the living color, you certainly don't have to wait long. Game 3, 4, and 5 of their season is going to be here on the East Coast. So I just thought to share that with you guys and gals. Now, let me take out the golf clubs a few swings here, because the Open Championship is already underway in Northern Ireland at Royal Portrush there, and the weather's been atrocious. No shock. That's going to be the storyline this weekend. When I checked early this morning, and I haven't really watched, I've tried to be in tune to what's happening. I know Lee Westwood was at the top of the leaderboard as of 9 this morning, and now I have to take a look to see who is at the top, because a lot of these players, still a few playing. I don't know if the rain has caused any delays or has slowed down play in the least, but as I pull that up here, and the leaderboard, Lee Westwood is not at the top of the leaderboard as of right now. And you do have a lot of people in the clubhouse as of right this second. And I'll get to that in a minute. But the rain is going to be a big-time factor, and no shock there. The weather is going to be anywhere from the low to mid-60s and rain intermittent. I know tomorrow, looking at my weather app, today was 100%. So maybe it was just, now I'm not trying to say there have been thunderstorms, but I'm sure there's going to be whether a mist or whether a steady rain where they could play through it. But as the weekend progresses, 65% tomorrow, 55% on Saturday, and I believe 50 on Sunday. So you're going to have some overcast, blustery, rainy, wet weather throughout the course of the weekend, which is going to be a character in all this, because how they play, how the wind factors into all this, and that's typical Open Championship, British Open, whatever you want to call it. So that's one thing we have to keep in mind. The other thing is Rory McIlroy. He goes home. This is a course he knows very well. Played on it several times, even going back to when he was an amateur at 16, where I believe he actually won a tournament there. Going now, 20 some odd years ago, almost 20 years ago. And Rory's the story only because 2 majors off of the win at the Masters, where he has not done well, whether at the PGA or the US Open. And mind you, this is the final golf major of the year. There's no other major in August, which used to be the PGA of years past. And I understand you do have the Ryder Cup there in late September, but it's not a major. But when you have Rory there, who was second in the Scottish Open just this past weekend, where he lost, he was neck and neck. Off the top of my head, I can't remember who won, but that was a good tune-up for him to get to this particular tournament. And to me, everybody's going to think that he's going to be the favorite going in, and I can understand why. But sometimes the blessing could be a curse. So even though he's 60 miles from his hometown there where the golf course is to where he grew up, and despite the fact that he's familiar with the area, the golf course, etc., it's not a shoo-in that he's going to come out with the claret jug when it's all said and done Sunday at around whatever the time it's going to be. Obviously, it's not going to be 7 o'clock because of the time difference. But we would think that despite this being a home court advantage, I don't know if this is going to bode well for him because, like I said, the blessing is, yes, everything that I mentioned, but the curse could be distractions, family, other miscellaneous things that could be going on in his life at the time. And yeah, that could be a detriment to his focus and to him trying to get to Sunday near at the top of the leaderboard to come out victorious. Now, I'm going to say he may be near, but I don't think he's going to win it. The one guy that I'm going to bank on to win, and I know it's going to be tough sledding, and despite the fact that he's a guy that finally won a major outside of the Masters just recently, and that's Scottie Scheffler. He's a guy that's always in the mix. He's a guy that's always there, whether he's 3, 4, 5, 6 strokes back, come into the weekend, as long as he makes the cut, then next thing you know, he's either within a stroke or two, or maybe even tied at the top when you get to the final day on Sunday. So I'm going to pick Scheffler here. Now, it's always unpredictable whenever they play on the other side of the pond because of the elements. And yes, that has to factor in, people. Not to say that has to be a picture-perfect day, but when you watch the Augusta, it is always, or it seems to be always sunny, very little wind, and picturesque. And I understand we can look at what happened there at the U.S. Open, there at Oakmont, where you had those storms come in, and J.J. Spawn, who was the only player to win that was under for the tournament. And I understand that was a freak of nature. That was more the golf course there than the actual weather. But even then, guys trying to hit the ball out of puddles and lies and things of that nature, this is what you're going to see here over the course of the weekend. And that could kill anybody. Not literally, of course, but figuratively. So how I look at it is, yes, I could pick a guy out of the hat, and I'm going to pick Scheffler to win. And Scheffler right now, he is 3 under. So he is 1 stroke back, although at the top, you have 3 at 4 under, guys I've never heard of other than Matt Fitzpatrick. But you have Jacob Olesen and Hae-Tong Lee. Let me say that again. Hae-Tong Lee. My apologies there, Mr. Lee. And then you have Matt Fitzpatrick, also at 4 under. Then you have Matthew Jordan, Scottie Scheffler at 3 under, followed by Nikolai Hogard, Lee Westwood, who was at the top, as I mentioned earlier this morning, but now is 2 under. And then you have, obviously, everybody else underneath that. A lot of other players you have 1, 2, 3. You have 8 golfers that are 2 under right now. And some of them are still playing. Sergio Garcia's through 9. You have Victor Hovland. He's only through 2, and he's 2 under. And Hovland's always at the top, especially in these first couple of rounds in any of these tournaments. And then you have Phil Mickelson, who actually shot 1 under, who right now looking pretty good. And not that I expect Mickelson to be there when it's all said and done, but still. And J.J. Spawn, the aforementioned, he's also 1 under. So you have a lot of these golfers that are clumped together literally within 2 or 3 strokes. So there's plenty of golf to be played. I'm going to see if I can get my eyes on it here after the recording. And of course, I'll follow it throughout the weekend. We'll come back there on Monday to recap it. And hopefully it's as good as what we've seen in Augusta with what happened there with Rory McIlroy, and maybe not as bad as what we did see with the PGA and even with the U.S. Open, the last 2 tournaments, which were somewhat forgettable. Now, I know Spawn, because it was just an anomaly with the course and him winning at 1 under, which is very rare when everybody else was at a plus or even. So we will certainly recap it there Monday. Looking forward to that as we get through the final golf major of 2025. And then lastly, and I haven't talked about the sport in a while, and I know it's not really on my radar, but I do have to bring it up. And thankfully, yesterday I did see, to the help of the people in the chat room who join me every Wednesday on the live stream, high noon Eastern time on YouTube, you do have a lightweight bout Saturday for UFC 318 with two legends going at it for the third time. And mind you, this isn't a end-all be-all type of bout, meaning that Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier, this isn't a who's going to take the lead, because if you recall, what was it, 2017, I believe, you got to go back 8 years, where Poirier won on, I believe, a submission first round, and in 2019, a unanimous decision for Poirier. So now you get Holloway in the ring again with Poirier to match not only wits, but strength and tactics and skill, etc. So now we have to wait and see whether or not Holloway, despite him losing the two matches against Poirier, whether or not he could come out on top and beat Poirier here. And we know these guys are legends in the sport. These guys are, you would think, this third time around, I could see it going the distance again. Not that I have my complete fingers on the pulse when it comes to this, but I am familiar with Holloway and how great he is. And I understand he's been more of a featherweight, where Poirier, we know what he's done throughout the course of his career. And I'll be watching this. This I'll be on top of so I could talk about it on Monday. But you do have at least something to sink your teeth into. And I know you had the fight last week with Amanda Serrano and Taylor, and I was not on top of that. I had people asking me, my guy Nike, shout out to you, my man, asking me, oh, did you think Serrano got robbed? And I heard about it, more so read about it, I didn't hear about it. But I read about it, but I didn't go back to watch highlights or anything like that. And it's not because I didn't want to watch because I didn't care or what have you, but it just wasn't on my radar. And I get it. People can say, well, JAYREELZ, you're a big sports fan. Come on, you got to be on top of this. Well, with the MMA, I'm slowly but surely getting into it from a standpoint of just trying to get myself at least an MMA UFC 101. And with Poirier and Holloway, I know that these guys, obviously legends in their own right, big-time fighters, that if I did not bring this up now, or certainly did not talk about it on Monday, it would be an awful job on my part to not even broach these two or even discuss this fight. So that's why I'm well aware to bring this up now to discuss. Now, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? We know these guys have a long track record, fights, etc. Obviously, this is going to add. Now, if Holloway wins, I think it's going to add more to this feud between these two, because if Poirier wins, and to me, Poirier I think has more to lose than Holloway. Holloway is just getting another crack at trying to beat Poirier to see if he could finally win and then maybe set up another fight down the road. And then maybe, who knows, if Poirier loses, then you're going to have a, what would you call it? It's not even a trilogy, quintilogy, who knows? And I may be speaking out of context there, but you get where I'm coming from. Now, to me, this is more of an opportunity. I'm sure money has a lot to play into Poirier wanting to fight Holloway again, considering he's been there, done that twice, and done it in submission fashion and unanimous decision fashion. So it's not as if there's been splits in the first two. So let's see. Does Holloway finally get the championship? Does he finally get the belt? Does he finally top the old rival? Or is it going to be business as usual for Poirier and he's going to come out on top like he did the other two fights? That we'll have to wait and see. So I'm fascinated to see how this is going to unfold, how it's going to shake down. And yes, we'll talk about that and anything else come Monday on the latest podcast. And that will conclude this one, my good people. So thank you for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what's happening in the world of sports. And as always, if you haven't done so, people, please subscribe, rate, review. Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com is the website. The YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Please subscribe there. Content constantly. I know it's been slow this week, so I haven't really put up a lot of stuff, but obviously with all that I've said here today and what lies ahead into the weekend, there will be some things coming down the pike. So you'll check my minute and a half shorts. I have some critique videos I'm still in the process of editing, which I'm going to hopefully post early next week, on top of some commentary, which you've seen here earlier this week with the All-Star selection of Jacob Misiorowski. If you haven't seen that, please check that. But also baseball's bigger problem. And no, I'm not even talking about Armageddon next year where the CBA is going to expire. But we have that. We have lifestyle vlogs. We have, obviously, the podcast. We have the live stream, all on YouTube. So please subscribe. Take a screenshot. Share it with me on the socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion on those aforementioned social media accounts or on the email address, the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. One more time. The JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. Again, how much more can I emphasize that as a full-time independent podcaster, content creator, trying to generate income in this field, carve and blaze a path in this space and universe, I am doing my damnedest in the blood and the DNA to put forth content on a consistent basis, on a constant basis, to keep you apprised of what's happening in the sports world, because this is what I love to do. One more time, in the blood and the DNA, as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and camera, I promise you, I will continue to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.